In the winter of 1325, in the fog-choked plains of northern Italy, a wooden bucket was stolen from a well and nobody knew it yet. But that simple act would drag entire cities into one of the strangest wars in medieval history. The city of Bologna was already one of the richest communes in Europe. Its towers pierced the sky like stone spears, its markets overflowed with silk, grain, and ambition, and its universities attracted minds from across the known world. But just beyond its walls lay its rival, Modena, smaller, sharper, and constantly watching. The two cities had been circling each other for decades like exhausted predators, each waiting for the other to blink first. The story, as it survives through chronicles and laughter, begins not in a throne room or battlefield, but at a simple well near the borderlands. A group of Modenese soldiers, or in some versions raiders, entered Bologna's territory during a tense standoff. They didn't burn cities, they didn't kill governors. They did something far more insulting. They stole a wooden bucket. It was not gold. It was not sacred. It was not even particularly well made. But in a world where honor was measured in inches of pride and centuries of grudges, it was enough. When Bologna heard of the theft, something strange happened. The bucket itself became irrelevant almost immediately. What mattered was what it represented. A city like Bologna could not allow its border to be crossed and mocked so casually. Not by Modena. Not again. At first, the council tried diplomacy. Messengers were sent. Demands were made. Return the bucket, they said, and this misunderstanding will be forgotten. But Modena, whether amused or defiant, refused. To them, it was not a diplomatic issue. It was a joke that had gone too far. That refusal changed everything. Inside Bologna's council chambers, tension thickened like smoke. Old nobles remembered earlier humiliations, younger voices demanded action. And slowly the bucket stopped being an object. It became a symbol of disrespect, of accumulated anger that had been waiting for an excuse. And in 1325, Europe was a place where excuses could turn into armies. Within weeks, Bologna began mobilizing. Not just soldiers, but mercenaries, professional warriors who sold their loyalty to the highest bidder. Coins were poured into armored companies, crossbow units, and cavalry contracts. The city's wealth, normally used for trade and expansion, was redirected towards something far more destructive. Modena, smaller but no less proud, responded in its own way. It allied itself with powerful regional forces aligned with the Holy Roman Empire, gathering support from nobles who saw Bologna's wealth as a threat to the balance of power. What began as a petty insult was rapidly transforming into a regional confrontation. And still, somewhere in the middle of all this, the bucket existed, forgotten by everyone except historians who would later struggle to believe it mattered at all. By the time armies assembled, the war was no longer about a bucket. It was about control of northern Italy's trade routes, about political dominance, about pride sharpened over generations. But the bucket remained the spark everyone pointed to, because no one wanted to admit how fragile everything really was. When Bologna's forces finally marched, the sight was overwhelming. Thousands of armored men moving beneath banners of red and white, crossbowmen in disciplined ranks, cavalry units shining like moving steel. It was not an army built for defense, it was built to make a statement. Modena's forces, though smaller, were hardened by necessity. They knew every road, every river crossing, every forest edge that could be used as advantage. And they had something Bologna's wealth could not buy instantly. Desperation shaped into strategy. The first clashes were not grand battles, but violent skirmishes along muddy fields and narrow roads. Supply wagons were ambushed. Scouts disappeared into fog. Entire units found themselves outmaneuvered by enemies they never fully saw. The war was not glorious. It was confusing, dirty, and fast-moving. Then came the turning point. Near the town of Zappolino, both forces converged in what should have been a minor engagement. Instead, it became the largest clash of the conflict. Thousands of soldiers collided in a chaotic field where visibility collapsed into dust and shouting. Horses slipped in mud. Crossbow bolts tore through armor. Commanders lost control of their formations within minutes. And in the chaos, something unexpected happened. Modena's forces began to push Bologna back. It was not a clean victory. It was not a tactical masterpiece. It was momentum, confusion, and terrain. Bologna's expensive army, designed for structured warfare, struggled in the disordered reality of the battlefield, and slowly, impossibly, they began to retreat. By nightfall, Bologna's forces had withdrawn. Modena claimed victory, and somewhere in the aftermath, soldiers looted abandoned equipment, carried off banners, and, according to legend, reclaimed far more than they had ever lost, including the bucket. Whether that detail is true or not hardly matters. What matters is what it became, a story so absurd that it survived centuries. But the consequences were real. The war reshaped alliances across northern Italy. It drained resources from both cities. It exposed how fragile political systems had become, where honor disputes could escalate faster than diplomacy could intervene. Merchants lost contracts. Farmers saw fields trampled. Entire regions lived under the shadow of sudden, unpredictable conflict. And yet, in the grand history of Europe, this war would be remembered not for territory gained or lost, but for its origin. A bucket. Not because the bucket caused the war in a literal sense, but because it revealed something deeper. That beneath the grand language of politics and power, medieval Europe was still governed by human emotion, pride, humiliation, and the desperate need not to look weak. In the end, no empire fell because of the bucket, no dynasty was erased. But something more subtle changed. The story became a warning passed through generations of how easily civilization could tip into chaos when symbolism mattered more than reason. And so the bucket survived, not as an object, but as a reminder that sometimes history doesn't begin with destiny. It begins with something so small no one thinks to ignore it until it is already too late.